Donald Trump's speeches are getting weirder and weirder, darker and darker. I mean, you know, this on Saturday he called Kamala Harris, our vice president, mentally impaired. Now, you know, there's many of us who have been saying for some time that Donald Trump is mentally impaired, including, you know, 29 psychiatrists who, you know, wrote a book about it. Dr. Bandy Lee, who's been on this program a number of times, was kind of the lead author on that thing and took most heat for it. But Kamala Harris, and then he said she was born that way. And is that like because she's born with brown skin? Yeah, I'm guessing that's what Trump meant. You know, I've said before, this is no longer a dog whistle. This is a bullhorn. This is you know, white sheets and burning crosses. We're in that territory right now in the Republican Party, or in Trump's Republican Party, and in Trump's part of the Republican Party, which is most of the Republican Party. Vice President Harris went down on Friday to the U.S.-Mexico border and gave a really good speech and pointed out that there would be thousands, more border agents right now, that the speed of time, the amount of time it takes to process somebody applying for asylum would go from 6 years down to 6 months if the legislation that Jim Langford, the Republican senator from, I believe, Oklahoma, authored, maybe Wyoming, I mix those states up, but wherever Langford's from, you know, one of those western states, that if that legislation, I mean, he's a conservative Republican, right? I mean, this is pretty tough legislation. But it really would have beefed up the border, and it would have beefed up the court system, and it, you know, because the system is just badly broken. It hasn't been updated since 1986 when Reagan did it. And Langford did the hard work on this, along with, you know, he had some Democrats who were working with him. And, you know, what came out of that, the bottom line that came out of that is that, you know, Kamala Harris gave a great speech and pointed out that this legislation would have largely solved the problem that the Republicans are screaming about, which is people crossing the border. And it failed because Donald Trump called up Mike Johnson. Now, this is after this legislation passed the Senate on a bipartisan basis. Democrats and Republicans voted for it. And it would have passed the House of Representatives. It was, you know, it was a no-brainer, this piece of legislation. And Donald Trump called up Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, and said, do not allow this to come to the floor for a vote. And so Mike Johnson's been sitting on it. And the only reason, literally the only reason Donald Trump did not want this piece of legislation to have a vote is because it would have solved the problem at the border, and he would no longer have anything to run on. But he's running around talking about how now well, here, this is, Joe Biden became mentally impaired. Kamala was born that way. She was born that way. And if you think about it, only a mentally disabled person could have allowed this to happen in our country. I mean, this is sick rhetoric. When Harris was asked about this at a fundraiser on Saturday, she said, it's just the same old tired playbook we've heard for years. And she's right. But we haven't ever heard this kind of rhetoric, at least rhetoric this explicit, from a Republican running for president of the United States. This is something new. And he spoke in Wisconsin, flanked on stage by large mugshots of migrants accused of crimes. He painted this hellscape picture of America. By the way, the same month that the FBI came out just a couple weeks ago and said the new crime statistics are out, and murder is down. You know, crime is down, way below where it was when Trump was president. Murder is way below where it was when Trump was president. Immigrants are far less likely to commit crimes than our U.S. citizens. And, I mean, that just makes sense. I mean, people come to this country not to commit crimes. They can commit crimes at home. They come to this country looking for opportunity. And if they're here illegally, they're still looking for opportunity. And you know, I get it. There are a few criminals who will get through, but they're very much the minority. And like I said, you're far more likely to be convicted of a crime or arrested for a crime or even to commit a crime if you're a natural-born American, if you're an actual American. So Trump is just ignoring reality here, of course. Nothing new about that. And then you look at the people that he's surrounding himself with. I mean, you know, he's got like John McEntee, the guy who led the screening for political appointees for Trump and for Project 2025. Who's John McEntee? He basically has no qualifications. He was loyal to Trump. So Trump put him in charge of the Office of Personnel in the White House. He had no background in this area. In fact, he failed a security check because he has a gambling addiction. No qualifications. And this guy then got a bunch of money from a right-wing billionaire to launch a dating app. It's called The Right Stuff. It's a dating app for conservatives. And this is from Wired magazine. One 18-year-old on the app, a young woman, was messaged by McEntee, who's 34 years old. She described her experience to Wired, quote, "It was very sexual from day one. He kept making comments about my age and how hot it would be to sleep with someone who is my age. He would say things like, I come and visit and we hook up or whatever. You should bring one of your friends or you should take a couple of your friends." And it was like verifying that my friends were the same age as me as well, end quote. So there's that guy. And then there's Kevin Roberts, the head of the Heritage Foundation, who now, you know, we talked about this last week. Now it comes out that he beat his neighbor's dog to death with a shovel because the dog was barking. And the neighbor didn't even realize this. I mean, this happened like 4 or 5 years ago. And the neighbor just thought his dog vanished. Apparently, Kevin Roberts not only beat the dog to death because he was bragging. I mean, we know he did that because he himself was bragging about it. But he apparently disposed of the body. And these are the kinds of people that are that Donald Trump is surrounding himself with. Meanwhile, the Republicans are eroding democracy. It's a mistake. One error at a time. That's the headlines by Tiffany Torres Williams over at Project 2025 takedown.substack.com. You know, I've mentioned there's a couple of really good Project 2025 Substacks out there. This is one of them. Secretary of State Christy Jacobson is the head of, oversees voting in Montana. She's the Montana Secretary of State. And in July, she illegally dumped tens of thousands of signatures off a ballot initiative to protect the right to abortion in Montana. And she had to be ordered by a judge to restore the names. And she was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, it was a mistake." "Well, put those names back." "Well, I don't know if I can do that right now." "Well, yes, you can." "Okay." She also has a history of trying to make it harder to vote, disenfranchising young voters and Native Americans specifically. When the Montana Supreme Court declared that what she was doing was illegal, she tried to take it to the Supreme Court. So I'm telling you, Republicans, I mean, if in Montana Republicans are worried. Now, of course, John Tester is running for the Senate. He's in the Senate right now. He's running for re-election in Montana. He's a Democrat from Montana. A good senator, kind of a middle-of-the-road guy, but a decent man. And, I think he actually does, and he's a Montana farmer. He's missing, I think, 2-3 fingers off one of his hands from farming equipment, from accidents. I mean, he's a real farmer. And Donald Trump is out there making fun of the size of his belly rather than talking about his politics, which is just absurd and frankly pathetic. This is what these guys are up to. And this is how sad and pathetic and really awful it is. Meanwhile, Republicans are passing legislation that is literally killing Americans. I'm not talking about abortion here. This goes beyond that, or in addition to that. Stick around. I'll tell you all about that after the break. And then I'll be picking up your calls. Stay tuned.